Sylvia stood frozen outside her apartment door, her 8-year-old son Brian's small hand clutched in hers, the winning lottery ticket burning against her chest. The sounds coming from inside made her stomach drop. A low scraping, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable creak of her bedroom closet opening. She had imagined this moment so differently. Just 30 minutes ago, she'd been screaming in the Quickmart parking lot, checking and rechecking the numbers on her phone against the crumpled ticket she'd played for 5 years. $300 million. $300 million. The phrase had played in her head like a prayer as she picked up Brian from after-school care early, too excited to wait. "We're going to celebrate, baby," she told him, watching his face light up in the back seat. "Mama's gonna make everything okay now." Now her hand trembled on her key ring. Brian tugged at her sleeve, confused by her sudden stillness. The sounds continued, someone rifling through her things, opening drawers, moving furniture. She knew she should turn around, should protect her son from whoever was behind that door, but her body moved on autopilot. She slid the key in, turned the lock. Her living room materialized in sharp, brutal detail. Marcus, her brother of 32 years, stood in the center of her modest apartment, her jewelry box dumped on the couch, her personal documents spread across the coffee table, her mother's photo album open in his hands like he owned it. He was thicker than she remembered, his face harder, a scar above his left eyebrow she'd never seen before. He'd been going through her entire life while she was gone. They didn't notice her at first. Marcus was talking on his phone, his voice low and menacing. "Yeah, she hit. 300 million. I told you I'd let you know the second it happened." Brian made a small, frightened sound. That's when Marcus's head snapped up. His face shifted, surprise, then something darker. Calculation. A slow smile spread across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Sylvie," Marcus said, her childhood nickname sounding like a threat. "We need to talk." She didn't let him finish. She pushed Brian behind her, blocking her son with her body even though the damage was already done. Brian had seen the violation, the intrusion, the threat. "Get out," Sylvia said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus set down the photo album slowly, deliberately. He took a step closer. "Now sis, that's no way to greet family. Especially when families come to discuss our mother's debts." She kept her ground, her hand finding Brian's, squeezing tight. Her mind raced. She'd locked every door, every window that morning. Checked twice like she always did. How long had he been in here? What had he seen? What had he taken? "I said get out, Marcus." Her voice was louder now, power rising through the fear. "Before I call the police." He caught her wrist as she reached for her phone, his grip bruising, his breath hot with liquor. The few neighbors in the hallway quickly found reasons to look away. They always did in this building. "Call them," Marcus whispered, his face inches from hers. "And I'll tell them how you stole Mama's lottery numbers. How that ticket really belongs to the family. How you've been planning to cut us all out." He glanced down at Brian, and his voice dropped lower. "Real nice boy you got there. Be a shame if anything happened to him while you're working all them night shifts." The threat hung in the air between them, explicit, undeniable, horrifying. And in that moment, standing in her violated home, her son trembling behind her, her miracle already weaponized against her, Sylvia understood. Freedom wasn't going to be free. Someone had already come to collect. And the person trying to rob her wasn't a stranger. He was blood. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never get to miss our channel new stories. It is quick, free, and best way to support us in bringing more interesting stories. Your support means the world to us and motivate us to create more good stories. Tell us where you are watching from, your country, city, so we can know how far our stories goes. Thank you. Let's begin the story. 2 hours earlier, everything had been different. Everything had been perfect. Sylvia had been standing at the Quickmart on Lexington Avenue, her CNA scrubs still on from her hospital shift, holding her phone with shaking hands as the clerk confirmed what the lottery app had told her 3 times already. She'd matched all 6 numbers. $300 million. $300 million. The numbers she'd played religiously for 5 years. Her late mother's birthday, 3 to 17. Brian's birthday, 8 to 22. The day she'd finally left Brian's father and chosen herself, 11 to 29. The numbers that represented every important moment, every painful lesson, every choice to survive. She'd almost skipped buying a ticket this week. Money was so tight that $5 felt like 50. She'd stood in that same Quickmart 3 days ago, staring at the lottery terminal, mentally calculating. $5 could buy Brian's favorite cereal, could go toward the electric bill, could sit in her emergency fund that never seemed to grow past $200 no matter how hard she tried. But something told her to play. Some whisper in her spirit that sounded like her mother's voice. Now, picking Brian up from the after-school program, she could barely contain the joy exploding inside her chest. She wanted to scream it from the rooftops. She wanted to grab every tired-looking mother in the pickup line and tell them it was possible, that miracles were real, that God saw them. But she stayed quiet, stayed careful. That's what you learned as a black single mother working 2 jobs in a city that didn't care if you made it or not. You kept your blessings close. You moved in silence. You protected what was yours. No more double shifts at the hospital, standing on her feet for 12 hours until her legs went numb. No more second job doing private home care through the night, sleeping in strangers' houses while they snored, rushing home at 6 a.m. to get Brian ready for school on 3 hours of sleep. No more choosing between groceries and Brian's asthma medication. No more panic attacks at 3 a.m. about rent, about bills, about what would happen if she got sick and couldn't work. No more crying in the bathroom at work, because she was so tired she couldn't remember the last time she wasn't tired. They were free. Finally, impossibly free. She'd driven home with the radio off, just listening to Brian talk about his day, his voice the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. They were going to be okay. Better than okay. They were going to have a life. A real life. College funds and family vacations, and a house with a backyard, where Brian could just be a kid without her worrying about the neighborhood, the violence, the 1,000 small dangers that haunted her every day. She'd already started making plans in her head. Call a lawyer first, then a financial advisor, then look at houses in better school districts. Maybe buy her own mother's house back from the bank, the one they'd lost 5 years ago. Maybe finally finish her nursing degree. Maybe. But now, standing in her apartment doorway watching Marcus smile at her like a predator who'd cornered his prey, Sylvia realized she'd miscalculated everything. She'd thought the hard part was over. She'd thought winning was the ending. She was wrong. The real fight was just beginning. And the enemy wasn't poverty or bad luck or an unfair system. The enemy was sitting on her couch, going through her mother's photo album, threatening her child, demanding what he thought he was owed simply because they shared DNA. This is the story of how Sylvia transformed from victim to warrior. How she learned that protecting your blessing means burning down bridges that were never meant to hold you. How she discovered that real family isn't blood, it's who shows up when everything's on fire. And how sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who knows exactly where you keep your spare key. Marcus looked completely at home on her threadbare couch, one arm stretched across the back like he paid the rent, her mother's photo album still open on his lap. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't apologize, just smiled that slow, dangerous smile and said, "We need to talk about that lottery ticket, sis." Sylvia's grip on Brian tightened. "How did you?" Mrs. Chun at the Quick Mart called her daughter. Her daughter called my boy Dante. Dante called me. Marcus shrugged. News travels fast when somebody from the neighborhood hits big. Real big. 300 million big. 1 hour. She'd had her miracle for 1 hour before it became a target. "You need to leave, Marcus." Sylvia kept her voice steady, reaching for her phone. "Now. That's not how family works." He closed the album carefully, reverently, like he actually gave a damn. "Remember what Mama used to say? We all we got. You remember that, Sylvie? All those promises you made at her funeral about looking out for each other." The guilt hit exactly where he aimed it. Sylvia felt Brian trembling beside her and pushed him gently toward the hallway. "Go to your room, baby." Brian hesitated, his wide eyes moving between his mother and this stranger who somehow knew their names, their history, their vulnerabilities. "Mama." "Now, Brian." Marcus watched Brian disappear down the hall, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Good kid. Real good kid. Be a shame if anything happened to mess up his childhood. This neighborhood ain't always safe, you know? Lot of things can happen to kids whose mamas work night shifts." The threat landed like a fist to her stomach. Sylvia's phone was suddenly in her hand, 911 ready on the screen. "Get out. Right now, or I'm calling the police." "Call them." Marcus stood slowly, towering over her in the cramped living room. "Then I'll tell them how Mama owed people money before she died. Serious people, Sylvia. People who don't forget debts. They've been patient, but now that you hit..." He smiled again, colder this time. "That debt's yours now. Lucky for you, you can actually pay it. Mama never said anything about..." Mama protected you. Like she always did. Like I always did. His voice turned sharp. $50,000, Sylvie. That's what she owed when her heart gave out. 50,000 to some very bad people who've been waiting very patiently for their money. You gonna let her die in debt? You gonna disrespect her memory like that? Sylvia's mind reeled. 50,000. Her mother, always so proud, so private about money troubles. Could it be true? Or was this just another of Marcus's games, another con, another way to take what wasn't his? Her phone buzzed. Keisha. Thank God for Keisha, her best friend since high school, who had a sixth sense for when Sylvia needed her. She answered, voice shaking. Can you come over? Now. 20 minutes later, Keisha stood in the doorway like an avenging angel in her postal worker uniform, all 5'3" of her radiating protective fury. Marcus, get your ass up and get out. Something about Keisha's presence, her witness, her refusal to be intimidated, shifted the dynamic. Marcus grabbed his jacket, but he took his time about it, making sure they both understood he was leaving by choice, not force. At the door, he turned back, and Sylvia saw something ugly flicker across his face. Resentment. Envy. Entitlement. You think that money makes you different? You're still the same broke girl from the South Side sleeping on a mattress on the floor, crying over bills. And family looks out for family, Sylvie. 300 million is more than enough to share. I'll be back when you've had time to think about what's right. The door closed behind him. The deadbolt clicked, and Sylvia collapsed against Keisha, her whole body shaking. That night, Brian slept fitfully beside her in her bed, whimpering in his dreams, while Sylvia scrolled through attorney websites on her phone, the lottery ticket burning in her nightstand drawer. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound in the hallway made her flinch. The miracle she'd prayed for had turned into a nightmare. And the monster wasn't a stranger. He was blood. And he knew exactly where she lived. Diane Foster's office sat on the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel, and the kind of quiet confidence that cost $500 an hour. The attorney was 50-ish, impeccably dressed, with silver locks and eyes that missed nothing. She slid a folder across her mahogany desk without preamble. We claim the ticket through an irrevocable trust before your brother files anything. Once it's in the trust, he can't touch it. But we need to move fast, today if possible. Diane's finger tapped a document. Men like Marcus don't wait. He could fabricate receipts, forge signatures, create a paper trail saying your mother lent you that $5. In court, it becomes your word against evidence. Sylvia's stomach dropped. He already has. Diane pulled up her laptop, turned it towards Sylvia. Marcus's Facebook page filled the screen. Photos of their mother. Childhood pictures of them together. Long captions about family betrayal and blood money, and how his sister forgot where she came from the second she got rich. The comments underneath were vicious. 2,000 shares in 3 days. The court of public opinion matters, Diane said quietly. Especially for a black woman with sudden wealth. The media loves this narrative. By noon, Sylvia had signed papers creating the New Horizons Trust. By evening, she'd hired Tony Chin, a private investigator Diane recommended, a former NYPD detective with a specialty in financial crimes. Tony's first report arrived 48 hours later. Sylvia read it in her hotel room, while Brian colored at the table, their apartment feeling too exposed, too known. Every word made her blood run colder. Marcus had been in contact with Vincent Caruso for 3 months. Vincent, who ran a lending business out of a warehouse in Red Hook. Vincent, whose name appeared in case files for extortion, assault, racketeering. Vincent, who specialized in targeting immigrant communities and poor neighborhoods with predatory loans that ballooned into impossible debts. The loan was real. $15,000, 8 years ago, when their mother's diabetes had spiraled and the hospital bills had piled up faster than Medicare could cover. Martha Johnson had been desperate, proud, silent about her suffering. She'd borrowed from a monster to survive. But Vincent's records claimed $75,000 now. Interest compounded monthly at rates that would make a loan shark blush. Except Vincent was a loan shark. He'd just made it legal enough to hide behind. The next page made Sylvia's hands shake. Security footage timestamps. Marcus outside her building, outside Brian's school, following her to work. He'd been watching them for weeks, cataloging their routine, waiting for something. He'd known she played the lottery. Had he been waiting for her to win? Tony's note was brief. He didn't just get lucky with timing. He was watching for this. Then came the final section, marked additional findings. Their father, Jerome Johnson, who disappeared when Sylvia was 12 and Marcus was 15. Gone without a trace, leaving Martha to raise 2 kids alone. The official story was abandonment. He'd run off with another woman, sent 1 postcard from Atlanta, then nothing. But Tony had found arrest records. Jerome had been picked up for questioning about a robbery at one of Vincent's properties 2 weeks before he vanished. Questioned and released. Then gone. There are patterns here, Tony had written. Vincent Caruso has a long memory and old scores to settle. Your father's disappearance timing is suspicious. Request permission to dig deeper. Sylvia closed the folder, her whole body numb. 20 years of believing her father had abandoned them. 20 years of her mother's silence. Had Martha known? Had she lived with that knowledge, that fear, that guilt? Her phone buzzed. Another news alert. Chicago lottery winner faces lawsuit from brother over shared ticket purchase. Then Brian's small voice from across the room. Mama? Why is Uncle Marcus being mean? Did you really promise Grandma we'd help him? Sylvia pulled her son into her lap, buried her face in his hair, and lied through her teeth. Uncle Marcus is confused, baby. And yes, I promised Grandma a lot of things. But I never promised to let anyone hurt us. Her phone buzzed again. Diane. Sylvia answered. They filed the lawsuit this morning, Diane said, her voice tight with anger. Marcus is claiming the lottery ticket was purchased with money your mother lent you before she died. As executor of her estate, he's entitled to half the winnings. He's got a notarized letter supposedly from Martha confirming the loan. Obviously forged, but proving that will take time. Sylvia, I need you to prepare yourself. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Through the hotel window, Chicago stretched out below them, millions of lights in the gathering dark. Somewhere out there, Marcus was celebrating. Vincent was calculating. And Sylvia was just beginning to understand the size of the web she'd stumbled into. The miracle had become a war. And she'd just discovered the enemy had been preparing for battle long before she'd even known she was fighting. The Marriott on Michigan Avenue became their fortress, registered under Keisha's cousin's name. Room 847, with a view of the lake that Brian barely noticed anymore. He'd stopped asking when they could go home. Ray found her anyway. He materialized outside Brian's school on Wednesday afternoon, leaning against a black Escalade like he belonged there. Tall, scarred, wearing a suit that cost more than Sylvia used to make in a month. He didn't approach, just held up his phone so she could see the screen. A photo of her apartment building. Another of Brian's school entrance. A third of the hospital where she'd worked. Sylvia's heart hammered. She pulled Brian closer, keys between her fingers like Keisha had taught her. Mrs. Johnson. Ray's voice was smooth, professional, like he was selling insurance. Mr. Caruso wanted me to deliver a message. $75,000 by Friday. That's the debt. Plus 20% of your winnings for protection services, making sure you and your boy stay safe in this dangerous city. Otherwise, he smiled, all teeth and no warmth. Accidents happen. Kids get hurt. You understand. She understood. She turned and walked away, hand clamped on Brian's, phone already dialing Diane. The restraining order against Marcus arrived on Thursday. He violated it on Saturday, showing up at Keisha's apartment at 2 a.m., drunk and raging about his money. The police took 45 minutes to respond. Detective James Richardson was different. Black, mid-40s, with tired eyes that had seen everything twice. He sat across from Sylvia in the hotel lobby and spoke quietly. Vincent Caruso's crew has been on our radar for 3 years. Organized crimes building a RICO case. Your situation, it might be the break we need. But I'm not going to lie to you. These people are dangerous, and they don't care who gets hurt. Work became its own nightmare. Her supervisor kept asking when she was coming back, voice tight with judgment. Co-workers she'd covered shifts for, lent money to, helped through hard times, they stopped calling. The ones who did call wanted loans, investments, opportunities to help manage her money. A high school friend she hadn't spoken to in 8 years needed $50,000 for her startup. A cousin from her father's side she'd met twice wanted to reconnect, over dinner and a business proposal. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had their hand out. Everyone thought they deserved a piece. Brian stopped sleeping through the night. The bedwetting started again, something he'd outgrown 2 years ago. He woke up screaming about the man in their apartment, about Uncle Marcus, about bad people coming to get them. Sylvia held him and lied. "We're safe, baby, I promise," while her own hands shook. Keisha moved into the hotel on day 6, dragging 2 suitcases and her fierce, unshakable loyalty. You're not doing this alone. I got vacation days saved up. My cousin can cover my mail route. We ride together. Real family, Sylvia thought, watching Keisha set up a makeshift command center on the hotel desk. Blood didn't make you family. This did. Tony called with the breakthrough on Sunday. Marcus's ex-girlfriend, Shanice, who'd finally gotten away from him 6 months ago. She sat in Tony's office and told them everything. Marcus had been planning this since their mother's funeral, going through Martha's papers, finding the loan documents, contacting Vincent. He'd been tracking Sylvia's lottery ticket purchases, noting the patterns, the same numbers every week. Waiting. He said if she won big, it was his lottery too, Shanice whispered, her voice breaking. Said blood was thicker than water, and she owed him. He'd been counting on it. When she actually hit, he called Vincent that same day, told him the debt could finally be collected. They were splitting it. Marcus gets the lawsuit money, Vincent gets his percentage. They had it all planned. Sylvia's tires were slashed that night in the hotel parking garage. The note tucked under her wiper blade was written in red marker. Family first. Pay up or pay the price. At midnight, locked in the hotel bathroom while Brian and Keisha slept, Sylvia called the lottery office. Her hands shook as she confirmed the claim through Brian's future trust, protecting every dollar legally, irrevocably. The money was safe. But they weren't. Not yet. Not while Marcus and Vincent circled like sharks who'd tasted blood. Through the bathroom door, she could hear Brian whimpering in his sleep. Her baby, who used to laugh all the time, who used to feel safe. Something hardened in Sylvia's chest. Something cold and determined and absolutely done with being afraid. They wanted a war. She'd give them one. But on her terms. With her rules. And she was going to win. Tony Chen's full report arrived in a manila envelope thick enough to be a murder weapon. Sylvia read it while Keisha took Brian to his first therapy appointment, and with every page, the person she thought she was crumbled a little more. Marcus owed Vincent $47,000. Gambling debts from underground poker games, cocaine debts from a habit that had started small and metastasized. He'd been in the hole for 2 years, dodging Vincent's collectors, making promises he couldn't keep. When their mother died and he went through her papers, he didn't find old debts, he found opportunity. A way to transfer his debt to someone who might actually be able to pay it. He'd been tracking Sylvia's lottery purchases for 18 months. Tony had found Marcus's notebook and Shanice's belongings. Pages of dates, ticket numbers, Sylvia's patterns documented with obsessive detail. She plays every Wednesday and Saturday. Same numbers. 3-17-8-22-11-29. Mama's birthday, the kid's birthday, some other date. When she hits big, I'm there. When not if. He'd been counting on it. Planning for it. Waiting like a vulture. The medical examiner's report on Martha Johnson listed cause of death as acute myocardial infarction. Heart attack. Natural causes. But Tony had found her phone records from the month before she died. 17 calls from unlisted numbers. A neighbor reported seeing aggressive men at Martha's door twice that week. Another heart attack survivor from the same hospital said Martha had confided she was terrified about old debts catching up. Vincent's people had been terrorizing her, and the stress had killed her as surely as if they'd put a gun to her head. Then came the section on Leon Johnson, their father. The man who'd walked away 22 years ago and never looked back. Except he hadn't walked. Tony had found police reports, witness statements, finally a cold case file that had been buried under paperwork and departmental incompetence. Leon had gotten involved with Vincent's predecessor in a robbery scheme that went wrong. He'd tried to run. His car was found burned out in Gary, Indiana. No body, but nobody looked that hard for a black man who'd been in the wrong place with the wrong people. Marcus knew. At 15, he'd overheard enough, seen enough, understood enough. And he'd never told Sylvia. Let her believe their father was a deadbeat instead of dead. Let their mother carry that grief alone. Use the lie to control the narrative. To paint Sylvia as the naive one, the soft one, the one who needed protecting. Shanice's recordings played through Tony's laptop, Marcus's voice clear and cold. She'll break. Trust me, I know my sister. Guilt's her weakness, always has been. Talk about mama enough, remind her about family loyalty, threaten the kid a little, and she'll hand over whatever we want. She's been a doormat her whole life. This is just making her useful. Laughter. Marcus's laughter. And Vincent's voice in the background. She better be as easy as you say. I don't have patience for difficult women. Sylvia sat in the silent hotel room, the laptop still playing, and felt something shift in her chest. Not fear anymore. Not even grief. Pure, crystalline rage. Detective Richardson came that afternoon with an offer. Vincent's operation stretched across 3 states: loan sharking, protection rackets, human trafficking networks using debt as chains. Dozens of families trapped, hundreds of victims. Sylvia's testimony, combined with the evidence Tony had gathered in Shanice's recordings, could be the keystone for a federal RICO case. "I won't lie to you," Richardson said, his voice heavy. "Cooperation means more danger in the short term. Vincent will see you as a threat, but it also means protection, federal protection. And it means stopping him from doing to others what he's done to you and your family." Sylvia looked at Brian's toys scattered across the hotel room. His therapy workbook on the nightstand. Her son, who jumped at shadows now, who couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. How many other children were living in that fear right now? How many other mothers were choosing between debt and safety? How many other families had been destroyed by Vincent's operation while good people looked away? "I'll do it," she said. "Whatever you need. I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. And I'm done letting men like Vincent and Marcus hurt people because it's easier to stay quiet." Richardson nodded slowly. "Then we move fast. Vincent doesn't know we're this close. We have a window." Through the hotel window, Chicago glittered in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, Marcus was planning his next move. Vincent was calculating his returns. They saw her as easy money. A doormat. A woman too weak to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The scared, guilt-ridden girl Marcus remembered was gone. Sylvia had died in that apartment the moment she heard her brother laugh about breaking her. What rose in her place was something harder. Something dangerous. Something that protected its own. A mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person alive. The wire felt cold against Sylvia's skin, taped beneath her blouse in the coffee shop bathroom. Detective Richardson's voice crackled through the earpiece hidden in her hair. "Remember, get him talking about the lawsuit, about Vincent, about the plan. We need his words." Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, confident and smiling like he'd already won. He ordered coffee he didn't pay for and slid into the booth across from her. "So, you ready to be reasonable?" Sylvia kept her hands steady around her cup. "Tell me what you want, Marcus." "What I've always wanted. What's fair?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "The lawsuit gives me legal cover, but we both know it's bullshit. Mama never lent you anything. I made that letter myself. Pretty good forgery, right?" He laughed, actually laughed. "But here's the thing, Sylvie. Drop the lawsuit, pay me and Vincent what we're owed, and this all goes away. Fight us, and we make your life hell. Your choice. How much does Vincent want?" 75 for Mama's debt, plus 20% of the jackpot going forward. Call it 60 million total. You'll still have 240 million. More money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. Why be greedy? Through the window, Sylvia saw unmarked cars moving into position. "And if I don't pay?" Marcus's smile died. "Then accidents happen, Sylvie. You, Brian, that loyal little friend of yours. Vincent doesn't play. You think I'm the threat? I'm trying to help you. Pay the man, live your life. It's simple." "Nothing about this is simple, Marcus." Her voice was steel now. "You fabricated evidence. You conspired with a criminal. You threatened my son. Your nephew. Our mother's grandson," Marcus shot back. "And you're willing to let her die in debt? Let her memory be disrespected? That's cold, sis. That's..." The doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn, voices sharp with command. Marcus's face went white, then red, his chair scraping back as reality crashed down. Richardson appeared, handcuffs ready, reading rights in a voice that carried through the shocked silence of the coffee shop. Across the city, simultaneous raids hit Vincent's warehouse, his home, 3 lieutenants' locations. Months of investigation crystallizing into one coordinated strike, Sylvia's cooperation the final piece they'd needed. The evidence was overwhelming. Shanice's recordings, Tony's financial documents, the wire recording. Marcus crumbled in interrogation, offering up Vincent's operation in exchange for a deal he wouldn't get. Vincent's lawyer arrived too late. The racketeering charges alone carried 20 years. The media pivot was instantaneous. Lottery winner helps FBI dismantle crime ring, replaced selfish sister abandons family. Sylvia's phone exploded with interview requests, book deals, movie offers. She ignored them all. Marcus's lawsuit died in dismissal, the forged letter admitted as evidence in his criminal trial. The permanent restraining order came through the same day Tony discovered the final betrayal. Marcus had been stealing their mother's Social Security payments for 3 years after her death. $743 a month, every month, deposited into an account he controlled. He'd been robbing their mother's memory while pretending to honor it. Brian asked the question one night, curled against Sylvia on the hotel bed that had become home. Is Uncle Marcus a bad person? Sylvia chose her words carefully. Uncle Marcus made bad choices. He hurt people he should have protected. He chose money and selfishness over love and family. That makes his choices bad. Whether that makes him bad, that's complicated, baby. But he's in jail. Yes, because there are consequences for hurting people. That's how we stay safe. Brian was quiet for a long moment. Are you sad? I'm sad about who he could have been. But I'm not sad he can't hurt us anymore. The courtroom was packed for sentencing. Marcus got 12 years, extortion, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, witness intimidation. As they led him away in handcuffs, he finally broke, screaming over his shoulder, "You're abandoning your family. After everything we've been through. You're just like Dad. You're a coward and a traitor." Sylvia stood, every eye in the courtroom on her, and met his gaze without flinching. Her voice carried clear and calm. "No, Marcus. I'm protecting my family. You stopped being family the moment you threatened my son." The doors closed behind him. The chapter ended. That afternoon, Richardson introduced her to 12 other victims of Vincent's operation. Single mothers with impossible debts. Small business owners trapped in protection racket cycles. Immigrant families who'd borrowed for medical emergencies and ended up enslaved. Their faces haunted her, the exhaustion, the fear, the shame of having been trapped. She'd been them. She'd almost stayed them. Only luck and lottery numbers had given her a way out. But what about everyone else? The idea took root slowly, growing through conversations with Diane, with Keisha, with Tony. A foundation. A trust. Resources dedicated to helping others escape the cycle she'd barely survived. Legal aid. Financial counseling. Safe housing. Job training. Using her platform and her resources not just to protect herself, but to help others protect themselves. From prey to survivor to protector to builder. The transformation was complete. The building on South Halsted Street had been abandoned for 3 years, windows boarded up, walls covered in graffiti. Sylvia stood outside with the architect and contractor, seeing not what it was but what it could become. 20 units. Families who needed a chance, not charity. A beginning, not an ending. 50 million, Diane had said when Sylvia announced the initial investment. That's bold. That's transformative. That's going to change lives. New Horizons Community Trust launched quietly, deliberately. No press conference, no fanfare. Just paperwork, purpose, and a mission statement Sylvia wrote at 3 a.m. while Brian slept. To provide families escaping poverty and violence with the resources, dignity, and support needed to build sustainable, empowered lives. The renovations took 4 months. 20 apartments, each with 2 or 3 bedrooms, updated kitchens, safe spaces. The ground floor became a childcare center with floor-to-ceiling windows and bright murals painted by local artists. The basement transformed into a community room with computers, meeting spaces, job training areas. On-site social workers. Weekly financial literacy classes. Legal aid clinic every Thursday. Sylvia hired carefully. 3 women who'd survived Vincent's operation became case managers. Their experience with the system, with trauma, with resilience made them invaluable. Keisha left the Postal Service to become Director of Community Outreach, her fierce loyalty and street wisdom perfect for the role. Diane provided legal counsel pro bono, helping families navigate debt relief, custody battles, housing discrimination. The media attention was different now. Lottery winner creates pathway out of poverty, replaced the earlier headlines. Interview requests poured in, but Sylvia accepted only a few, always bringing families from New Horizons to tell their own stories. Brian bloomed in his new private school, made the basketball team, brought friends home to their new house, a beautiful 3-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with an alarm system, cameras, and reinforced locks that Sylvia checked every night. The nightmares came less frequently. The bedwetting stopped. In therapy, he was learning to process what had happened, to understand that safety could be real, that trust could be rebuilt. Sylvia's own therapy sessions were harder, unpacking 32 years of conditioning, of believing she owed family everything, of sacrificing herself to keep peace. Learning that boundaries weren't betrayal. That saying no was powerful. That protecting herself and Brian wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The resistance surprised her at first. Old neighbors who accused her of forgetting where she came from, of playing savior, of thinking she's better now. Comments on social media about poverty porn and white savior energy, even though she was black, from the neighborhood, knew the struggles intimately. Some said she should have given everyone cash instead of controlling how help was distributed. But for every critic, there were 10 families lined up for housing applications. Single mothers with stories that mirrored Sylvia's, working multiple jobs, choosing between rent and food, trapped in cycles they couldn't break. Women who'd escaped abusive partners and needed safe places to land. Families crushed by medical debt, predatory loans, systemic barriers designed to keep them down. The grand opening was a September morning, crisp and bright. 20 families had moved in over the previous month. Carmen Rodriguez stood at the ribbon with her 3 kids, ages 6, 8, and 10, holding oversized scissors. She'd been trapped in Vincent's debt cycle for 4 years after her husband's cancer diagnosis, working 3 jobs and still falling further behind. Now she had a safe apartment, childcare while she attended nursing school, legal help clearing the fraudulent debt Vincent had piled on. Carmen's voice broke as she spoke to the crowd of neighbors, press, politicians who'd shown up. You gave us more than housing. You gave us dignity. You gave us a chance to breathe, to sleep without fear, to believe our kids could have better. This isn't charity. This is justice. This is what happens when someone who's been where we are remembers what it felt like and does something about it. The ribbon fell. The doors opened. Children ran laughing through the hallways toward the playroom. Mothers cried, hugging each other, hugging Sylvia. Keisha grinned, clipboard in hand, already organizing the welcome orientation. Sylvia stood back, watching, Brian's hand in hers. Her son looked up at her with those wise eyes that had seen too much too soon. You did a good thing, Mama. We did a good thing, baby. This is for all of us. Through the windows of New Horizons, she could see the neighborhood she'd grown up in. The corner store where she'd bought the winning ticket. The bus stop where she'd waited at 5 a.m. for work. The streets that had raised her, broken her, and now, finally, would heal because of her. Marcus had been wrong about everything. The money didn't make her different. The money gave her the power to honor who she'd always been, a woman who protected, who fought, who refused to leave others behind. From survival to purpose. From victim to builder. From broken to whole. The transformation wasn't just Sylvia's. It was everyone's who walked through those doors. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale coffee. Marcus sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, his face harder than Sylvia remembered, eyes tracking her every movement as she took the witness stand. She'd worn a simple navy dress, no jewelry except their mother's small gold cross. A choice. A message. The prosecutor's questions were methodical. Walk us through the day you won the lottery. What happened when you arrived home? What did the defendant say? What did he threaten? Sylvia answered calmly, factually, her voice steady even when describing Brian's fear, the slashed tires, Ray's approach outside the school. She didn't cry. Didn't dramatize. Just told the truth in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. Marcus's attorney tried during cross-examination. Isn't it true you promised your mother you'd take care of your brother? Didn't you have a responsibility to family? Aren't you being vindictive because he asked for help you could easily afford? Sylvia met each question with the same calm precision. I promised my mother I'd protect Brian. I kept that promise. Family doesn't threaten children. Extortion isn't asking for help. The prosecution's evidence buried Marcus. Shanice's recordings played for the jury, his laughter about breaking his doormat sister, his plans to guilt-trip Sylvia into submission, his casual discussion of threatening Brian. Financial documents showed his gambling debts, drug purchases, theft of their mother's social security. Text messages between Marcus and Vincent plotting the timeline, splitting the take. Vincent Caruso's trial ran parallel in federal court, his charges more severe. RICO violations, loan sharking, witness intimidation, connections to human trafficking. Other victims testified. A restaurant owner who'd paid protection money for 6 years. A single mother who'd borrowed $3,000 for her daughter's surgery and ended up owing $50,000. An elderly couple who'd lost their small grocery store to Vincent's manufactured debt. Sylvia watched them testify, saw herself in their faces, heard Brian's nightmares in their trembling voices. Her victim impact statement came on a Thursday afternoon, the courtroom packed. She stood at the podium, Brian and Keisha in the front row, Diane beside them. She'd written it by hand, revised it a dozen times, finally settling on truth without embellishment. My brother didn't see me as family. He saw me as an ATM. He tracked my lottery purchases for 18 months, not out of brotherly concern, but because he was counting on my potential win to solve his problems he created through his own choices. He fabricated evidence. He conspired with criminals. He threatened my 8-year-old son, his own nephew, to extort money he had no right to claim. My son learned the hardest lesson a child can learn, that DNA doesn't guarantee love, and sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who claim to be protecting you. Brian still checks door locks 3 times before bed. He still asks if bad people are coming for us. My brother's actions stole my son's sense of safety and my ability to trust anyone who says they're family. This isn't about money. This is about a man who chose to destroy rather than build, to threaten rather than support, to weaponize family bonds instead of honoring them. The brother I grew up with died long before these crimes. The man at that table is a stranger who wears his face. The verdicts came swiftly. Marcus, 12 years for extortion, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, plus restitution he'd never be able to pay. Vincent, 25 to life for racketeering, loan sharking, witness intimidation, and a litany of federal charges that would keep him behind bars until he was an old man, if he lived that long. Brian's reaction was complicated. Relief that the bad men were gone. Sadness for an uncle he'd barely known. Confusion about what family meant when your own blood could hurt you so badly. Sylvia held him through it all, explaining in age-appropriate language that love is a choice, that safety matters more than obligation, that some relationships are toxic no matter how much you want them to be healthy. The grief surprised her. Not for Marcus as he was. The man who'd threatened her son deserved every year of his sentence. But for the brother she'd imagined in childhood, the protector she'd wanted him to be, the family relationship that had never actually existed except in her hopeful imagination. She mourned a ghost, a fantasy, a version of Marcus who'd died long ago if he'd ever lived at all. The women of New Horizons understood. Carmen, who'd cut off her abusive parents when they tried to use her kids as leverage. Letitia, whose sister had stolen her identity to open credit cards. Janice, whose brother had sold her belongings to feed his addiction. They gathered around Sylvia in the community room, sharing stories of toxic family, necessary boundaries, the grief that comes with choosing yourself over blood. Cutting them off doesn't make you heartless, Carmen said quietly. It makes you wise. Sylvia wrote Marcus one letter before the sentencing. Brief, final, honest. She told him she forgave him not for his sake, but for her own peace. She wished him time to reflect, to heal, to become someone different. But she would not visit, would not write again, would not allow him access to her life or Brian's. This was goodbye. This was closure. This was the end of a chapter that should have ended years ago. She didn't mail it for 3 days, reading it over and over, making sure every word was what she truly meant. Finally, she sealed the envelope, dropped it in the mailbox outside New Horizons, and walked back inside to the families who'd chosen to be there, who'd earned their place in her life through loyalty and respect and genuine love. Blood didn't make you family. Choice did. Action did. Showing up when it mattered, protecting instead of threatening, building instead of destroying. The trial was over. Justice had been served, imperfect but real. And Sylvia was finally completely free. New Horizons grew like something organic, spreading roots across Chicago, then Milwaukee, then Detroit. 5 properties within the first year, each one carefully chosen in neighborhoods that reminded Sylvia of where she'd come from. 153 families received housing, legal aid, childcare, job training. The numbers mattered, but the stories mattered more. Women who'd found their voices, children who could finally just be children, families who'd stopped running and started building. Sylvia met Devin Wright at a community law seminar on tenant rights. He was presenting on predatory lending practices, his voice passionate but measured, his approach practical rather than theoretical. During the Q&A, someone mentioned Marcus Johnson's case. Devin's face tightened. I was briefly retained by Mr. Johnson, he said carefully. I withdrew from the case when I discovered material misrepresentations. I don't participate in fraud, regardless of the fee. After the seminar, Sylvia introduced herself. Devin's eyes widened slightly, recognition, embarrassment, something like respect. Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry about. Don't apologize for having integrity, she said. That's rare enough to be worth celebrating. He'd walked away from a 6-figure retainer because Marcus had lied about the forged documents. took a significant financial hit rather than compromise his ethics. In a profession that often rewarded moral flexibility, Devon had chosen differently. Their courtship was glacial, deliberate. Coffee conversations about everything except romance. Attending New Horizons events where Devon volunteered his legal expertise. Slow building of trust through consistency, reliability, transparency. Both of them were survivors of betrayal. Sylvia from Marcus, Devon from an abusive adoptive father he'd cut off at 18. They understood caution. They understood boundaries. Brian watched Devon with the wary intensity of a child who'd learned that adults could be dangerous. He tested Devon constantly, asking impossible questions, creating scenarios, looking for cracks in the facade. Devon handled it with patient grace. "My dad left when I was little," Brian said one afternoon while Devon helped Sylvia organize donation boxes. "Then Uncle Marcus tried to hurt us. Why should I trust you?" Devon set down the box he was holding and crouched to Brian's eye level. "You shouldn't. Not yet. Trust is earned, not given. All I can tell you is I'll show up when I say I will. I'll be honest even when it's hard, and I'll never threaten you or your mom. Beyond that, you get to decide if I'm trustworthy. Take all the time you need." Keisha's approval came 3 months in, watching Devon and Sylvia work together at a New Horizons fundraiser. "He looks at you like you're a person, not a prize. Like he respects you, not just wants you. That's different." Their first real date was 6 months after meeting, dinner at a quiet Ethiopian restaurant where they finally talked about more than work and community service. Devon shared his foster care story, bouncing between 7 homes before aging out of the system. His adoptive father who'd seemed perfect until Devon was old enough to fight back. The choice to cut off someone who claimed to love him but only knew how to hurt. "People say blood is thicker than water," Devon said, his voice quiet. "But the full quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose matter more than the bonds we're born into." Sylvia reached across the table, took his hand. "My therapist says something similar. Family is who shows up, who stays, who protects instead of hurts." "Then we're building our own families," Devon said. "From people who've earned it." Marcus's letters arrived every few weeks from prison. The first batch was manipulation, guilt trips about family, reminders of childhood, attempts to reframe his crimes as misunderstandings. Then came genuine apologies, or what looked like them, therapy speak about accountability and change. Then anger when Sylvia didn't respond, accusations of cruelty, demands that she at least write back. She burned them all without opening them after the third one. Whatever healing Marcus needed to do was his responsibility, not hers. Brian found one before she could dispose of it. "Mama, Uncle Marcus wants me to visit him. He says he misses me and wants to explain." His voice was small, uncertain. "Is it okay that I don't want to? Does that make me bad?" Sylvia pulled Brian onto her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. "Baby, listen to me. You never owe anyone access to you. Not even family. Especially family who hurt you. Uncle Marcus made choices that scared you, that made you feel unsafe. You don't have to forgive that. You don't have to give him another chance. Your feelings are valid, and your boundaries are yours to set. But what if he really changed? Then he changed for himself, and that's good. But you still don't owe him anything. Changed or not, you get to decide who's in your life. That's your power, and nobody, not me, not Uncle Marcus, not anyone, gets to take that from you." The official meeting happened on a Saturday morning. Devon arrived at their house with flowers for Sylvia and a basketball for Brian, his nervousness endearing. They sat in the living room, the 3 of them, and Devon spoke directly to Brian. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not trying to replace anyone or be your dad. You already have people you love, and I respect that. I just really like your mom. I think she's amazing, strong and kind and smart. And I think you're a pretty cool kid who's been through more than most adults. If you're okay with me being around more, spending time with both of you, I'd really like that. If you're not okay with it, I understand completely. This is your home, your family, your decision too." Brian studied Devon for a long moment, that old soul wisdom in his young eyes. "Do you promise not to hurt my mom?" "I promise to try my absolute best not to. I'll make mistakes, everyone does. But I promise to be honest, to communicate, to respect her boundaries and yours. And if you ever feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you tell your mom, and I'll step back. No questions asked." "Okay," Brian said finally. "You can be around. But I'm watching you." Devon smiled, genuine and warm. "That's fair. I'd be watching me too." Through the window, Sylvia could see New Horizons' second building in the distance, families moving in, children playing in the new courtyard. She'd built something from ashes, safety from trauma, community from isolation, love from loss. Marcus had been wrong about everything. The money hadn't made her different. It had given her the resources to become who she'd always had the potential to be. And now, carefully, slowly, she was learning to trust again. To let someone see her vulnerabilities without weaponizing them. To believe that not everyone who claimed to care was lying. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was healing. It was choosing to live, not just survive. 3 years after that terrifying night when Marcus had violated her home and her peace, Sylvia stood in front of Congress. New Horizons had grown beyond her wildest imaginings. 18 properties across 7 cities, 600 families housed, 200 women who'd completed job training and secured stable employment. The legal aid division had handled over 400 cases, debt relief that freed families from predatory cycles, custody battles won, domestic violence protection orders secured. The senators listened as she testified about predatory lending's devastating impact on single mothers, about how debt became slavery, about how Vincent Caruso's operation was just one of thousands nationwide trapping vulnerable families. Her voice was steady, authoritative, backed by data and lived experience. "We don't need charity," she told them. "We need systemic change. We need enforcement of existing laws. We need to stop treating poverty as a personal failing and start treating predatory lending as the crime it is." Brian watched from the gallery, 11 years old now, confident in a way that made Sylvia's heart ache with pride. He volunteered at New Horizons twice a week after school, helping with homework clubs and reading to younger children. The scared 8-year-old who'd hidden in his bedroom had transformed into a compassionate young man who understood that safety was something you built, not something you waited for. Devin proposed on a spring evening at the first New Horizons property on South Halsted. The residents had planned it, decorations in the community room, children making signs, Carmen orchestrating with the precision of a military campaign. When Sylvia arrived for what she thought was a routine meeting, Devin was waiting with a ring and words that mattered more than any grand gesture. "You've taught me that family is built through choice and consistency. That love is actions, not promises. That the strongest people are the ones who've been broken and chosen to rebuild. I choose you. Every day. Will you choose me back?" She said yes, surrounded by people who'd earned their place in her life through loyalty and respect and genuine love. The wedding was small, intimate, held in their backyard with string lights and folding chairs. New Horizons families filled the seats. Keisha served as maid of honor, crying through her makeup. Diane officiated. Detective Richardson attended with his wife. Tony Chen brought his daughter. Not one blood relative was invited. The family that surrounded them had been chosen, tested, proven. Marcus's final letter arrived a week before the wedding. Different from the others, no manipulation, no demands, no attempts at reconciliation. Just accountability. He acknowledged the harm he'd caused, accepted responsibility for his choices, expressed genuine remorse. He asked for nothing. Not forgiveness, not visits, not a relationship. Just wanted her to know he was trying to become someone different, someone better. Sylvia wrote back once, briefly. She acknowledged his growth, wished him continued healing, but maintained her boundaries firmly. No visits. No phone calls. No relationship. Just closure on a chapter that should have ended years ago. Some bridges, once burned, stayed burned, not out of cruelty but out of wisdom. The Women Who Make a Difference award came with a gala in New York, a crystal trophy, and a speech Sylvia had written and rewritten a dozen times. Standing at the podium in a dress that cost more than her old monthly rent, she spoke from the heart. "I didn't set out to build an empire. I set out to protect my son from people who believed my blessing belonged to them. But somewhere in that fight, I realized there were hundreds, thousands of women fighting the same battle. Against poverty. Against abuse. Against systems designed to keep them trapped. New Horizons isn't charity. It's justice. It's what happens when you stop asking permission to survive and start demanding the right to thrive. My brother thought he could break me through guilt and fear. He was wrong. What he broke was my willingness to sacrifice myself for people who didn't value me. And from those broken pieces, I built something that's helped hundreds of families build themselves back up. That's not revenge. That's transformation." Brian's 6th grade essay titled My Hero, "My Mom Was Simple, Honest, Devastating." He wrote about the night Uncle Marcus broke in, about moving to hotels, about watching his mother transform from scared to strategic to unstoppable, about learning that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to protect what matters, about boundaries being love, not selfishness. His teacher framed it. Sylvia cried reading it. Devin hung it in his office. 10 years after the lottery win, New Horizons operated in 15 states. Over 5,000 families had received assistance: housing, legal aid, job training, childcare, financial literacy. The organization had helped dismantle 3 additional predatory lending operations through cooperation with law enforcement. Sylvia's advocacy had contributed to new federal regulations on payday loans and title lending. Her memoir, No Apologies, Building an Empire After Family Betrayal, became a New York Times bestseller. The book tour was exhausting but meaningful. Everywhere she went, women approached with their own stories of toxic family, necessary boundaries, the guilt of choosing themselves. She told them what she'd learned, that you can love people and still protect yourself from them, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that saying no is a complete sentence. The 10th anniversary gala for New Horizons was held in a convention center that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. 1,500 people attended, residents past and present, donors, politicians, community leaders. Awards were given. Stories were shared. Families who'd started with nothing showcased businesses they'd built, degrees they'd earned, lives they'd transformed. Brian, 18 now and accepted to Columbia for social work, gave the keynote speech. He was tall, poised, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd survived trauma and chosen to help others do the same. "My uncle tried to steal our future," Brian said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "He thought my mom's lottery win belonged to him because they shared DNA. He weaponized family bonds. He threatened a child. He tried to break the strongest person I've ever known. My mom said no, and then built a future for thousands of people. That's not revenge. That's revolution. That's what happens when you refuse to let cruelty win." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Sylvia stood next to Devin, Keisha on her other side, watching her son speak truth to a room full of people who understood that survival was only the beginning. Thriving was the goal. Later, after the speeches and the dinner and the dancing, Sylvia stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Devin found her there, wrapped an arm around her waist, said nothing because nothing needed to be said. She thought about that night 10 years ago, standing at her apartment door, hearing sounds that shouldn't be there, her hand trembling on her keys. How terrified she'd been. How violated. How certain that her miracle had become a nightmare. Marcus had been right about one thing: the lottery changed everything. But not in the way he'd imagined. The money wasn't the blessing. The blessing was learning that she didn't owe anyone her peace, her safety, or her joy. The blessing was discovering that sometimes the family you're born into is just your origin story, and the family you choose is your legacy. Marcus was somewhere in a federal prison, serving year 8 of his 12-year sentence. Vincent was in a different prison, where he'd likely die. Their attempts to steal her blessing had failed. Their attempts to break her had backfired spectacularly. Because from that violation, that trauma, that moment of terror, Sylvia had built an empire of second chances. Not just for herself, but for thousands of others who needed someone to believe they deserved better, that they could have better, that their circumstances didn't define their worth. Brian appeared on the balcony, grinning. "Keisha's starting a conga line. She's demanding the founder's presence." Sylvia laughed, free, genuine, the sound of a woman who'd survived and then thrived and then helped others do the same. She took Brian's hand, Devin's hand, and headed back inside to the celebration. To the family she'd chosen. To the legacy she was building. To the revolution that started the night she learned to say no, and discovered that sometimes the most radical act is protecting your peace. The little girl from the South Side, who used to work double shifts and cry in bathroom stalls, was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd turned trauma into transformation, betrayal into empire, victim into victor. Not because the lottery gave her money, but because she'd finally learned what she was worth, and refused to accept anything less. That was the real miracle. That was the blessing Marcus could never steal. That was legacy.